Okay. Okay, so we're going to look at the text. We'll start with the first verse. Okay, the hearers and solitary realizers arise from the excellent sages. The excellent sages are born from bodhisattvas. The compassionate mind and the non-dual awareness, as well as the awakening mind, these are the causes of bodhisattvas. Okay, so hearers and solitary realizers are beings who practice what's called the fundamental vehicle. In other words, they meditate on the Four Noble Truths, on dependent arising, and they aspire to attain their own personal nirvana. So while they may have compassion for others, they're not motivated by compassion in all their actions, and their primary focus is their own liberation from cyclic existence. So here it's saying that those hearers and solitary realizers, hearers are so called because they hear the Buddha's teachings and then teach them to others, and solitary realizers are so called because in their last lifetime, before they attain nirvana, they usually appear at a time when there is not a founding Buddha, who was teaching the Dharma. So they practice in a more solitary way. So they're born from the excellent sages. The excellent sages refer to the Buddhas. So the way in which these hearers and solitary realizers are born from the Buddhas is that the Buddhas give them teachings. Okay? So by the power of the Buddha teaching the Dharma, then the hearers and solitary realizers learn it, they put it into practice, and they achieve their own nirvana. So it's in that sense that they're born from the Buddhas. Okay. Then the question is, where did the Buddhas come from? Okay. The excellent sages are born from bodhisattvas. In other words, that before becoming a Buddha, somebody is a bodhisattva. Yeah. So here, the meaning of born is a little bit different. In the first meaning, that the hearers and solitary realizers are born from the Buddhas, it means that the Buddhas were the cooperative conditions for them attaining their nirvana, because the Buddhas taught them the Dharma. When we say that the Buddhas are born from bodhisattvas, it means that the bodhisattvas were the substantial cause, not a cooperative condition for those Buddhas. In other words, before Shakyamuni Buddha was a Buddha, he was a bodhisattva. So there's a continuity between that bodhisattva and that Buddha. And so it's in that way that we say that the Buddhas were born from bodhisattvas. So do you see the difference in the meaning of born in those two situations? Okay. Then, what are the causes of bodhisattvas? Okay. So the compassionate mind, non-dual awareness, and the awakening mind, or bodhicitta, these are the causes of bodhisattvas. So we have, he's delineating three things here, okay? The compassion, the non-dual awareness, and the awakening mind. Okay? So, when Chandrakirti says that, he's basing it on a passage in Nagarjuna's Precious Garland, which says, if you in the world wish to attain unparalleled awakening, its roots are the altruistic aspiration to awakening, firm like the monarch of mountains, compassion reaching to all quarters, and wisdom not relying on duality. Okay, so Nagarjuna himself kind of stated these three as the causes for unparalleled awakening and the causes of bodhisattvas. Okay, so we may have this question. If somebody is becoming a bodhisattva, when they enter the bodhisattva path of accumulation, they do that because they have bodhicitta. Okay? So if the moment you get full bodhicitta, you also become a bodhisattva, and those two things happen at the same time, then how is bodhicitta the cause of a bodhisattva? Do you get what I'm saying? If two things happen at the same time, they can't be cause and effect. So if somebody becomes a bodhisattva, at that moment they generate spontaneous bodhicitta. How is bodhicitta a cause of those bodhisattvas? Okay. So Chandrakirti explains that it's, when they say that it's bodhicitta is the cause of bodhisattva, it's not talking about full-fledged bodhicitta. It's talking about the mind that is cultivating bodhicitta before they actually become bodhisattvas. Okay, so because causes always have to precede the effect. So that mind that is cultivating bodhicitta is, they say, is like the bark of sugar cane. But the actual bodhicitta that occurs at the same time as you become a bodhisattva is like tasting the inside of the sweet part of the sugar cane. So there's a big difference between them. Okay. Then we may also have another question that says, well, first somebody generates bodhicitta and they become a bodhisattva. Okay. Then they train in the 6 far-reaching practices, and only when they practice far-reaching wisdom do they gain the wisdom that's free from the 2 extremes. Okay? So first you become a bodhisattva, then you practice the 6 far-reaching practices, and the 6th one is wisdom, when you gain the wisdom that's free of the 2 extremes. So how can you say that that wisdom is the cause of bodhisattvas? Because the bodhisattvas generated after, when they're already bodhisattvas. So how is that a cause of bodhisattvas? Okay, so here it's explained that the non-dual understanding that Chandrakirti is referring to as a cause of bodhisattvas doesn't refer to the direct perception of emptiness, in which subject and object don't appear anymore. Okay, it doesn't mean non-dual in that way. But what it's referring to is if the understanding of emptiness that is free of absolutism and nihilism, that is generated by a sharp faculty practitioner before they become a bodhisattva. Okay, so there's two. We talk about bodhicitta and wisdom as being like the 2 wings of the bird, and, we have to have both of them. Yeah. So a sharp faculty person, which of course we all aspire to be, but who knows if we are, they have some feeling for bodhicitta, but then what they do is they meditate on emptiness until they can get a conceptual understanding of emptiness, a correct inferential understanding. Okay? Doesn't have to do with having the union of serenity and insight, but just a correct conceptual understanding. And that correct conceptual understanding gives that bodhisattva completely firm conviction that it is possible to eliminate all of the afflictions, and that awakening or nirvana is actually something possible to attain. So a sharp faculty person gets that firm conviction in the possibility of awakening by generating an understanding of emptiness before they enter the bodhisattva path. Okay? They already have some feeling for bodhicitta, so they're not a hearer. They're not going down the hearer and solitary realizer path. They have some feeling for bodhicitta. Okay? And this non-dual understanding is free from the 2. It's not non-dual in the sense of free of subject and object appearing differently, because that only happens when you have the direct perception of emptiness. But it's non-dual in the sense that it's the correct conceptual understanding that is free from holding on to absolutism and nihilism. So absolutism Sometimes it's translated as eternalism or permanence. What it means is grasping true existence, thinking that everything is some external objective reality. So it's free from that extreme. And it's also free from the extreme of nihilism, which says nothing exists whatsoever. So, you know, in our path to try and find the middle way, we'll often go between these two extremes. Oh, everything's inherently existent, exactly like I see it right now. And if it isn't inherently existent, well, then nothing exists. And so then we flip from the extreme of inherent existence to the extreme of nihilism. Okay? So this non-dual awareness that is the cause of bodhisattvas is free from those two extremes, even though it doesn't perceive emptiness directly. Okay? So that's how it can still act as a cause for bodhisattvas, even though the wisdom that is non-dual in the sense of being free of subject and object appearing isn't generated until after somebody becomes a bodhisattva. Okay? With me? Kinda? Somewhere? Okay. So, practitioners of modest faculties, not the sharp faculties, but the modest faculty ones, principally rely on faith in the Buddha and the spiritual master, that when these people say that awakening is possible, then they trust the person and they have that kind of faith. So, so those are the modest faculty ones. But here, when we're talking about non-dual awareness being the cause of bodhisattvas, we're talking about the sharp faculty ones. Okay? But, yeah, so Chandrakirti is mostly focusing on the sharp faculty ones. But he is speaking in some general way that even people before they generate the bodhicitta and become bodhisattvas have some understanding of wisdom that's free from absolutism and nihilism. Maybe not a complete understanding, but some understanding. Yeah. So that's how it is included as a cause for those modest faculty bodhisattvas. Okay? Because the modest faculty bodhisattvas, you know, they don't examine things quite as closely. You know, they hear somebody say, oh, yes, things are not inherently existent. And they hear the teachings, and yeah, that sounds good, and the Buddha said that, my teacher said that, and so, yeah, I believe it. Yeah. So those are modest faculties. They're not sharp faculties, because they're not really testing what they're hearing. They're believing it because somebody else said so, okay, out of faith. So the sharp faculty ones are really thinking about, oh, the teacher said that. Now, does that make sense? What about this? What about this? What about this? Okay? So really testing things. And through their testing and inquiry and analysis and investigation, then they come to a much clearer understanding than the ones who rely on faith. Okay? Now, hearers and solitary realizer arhats, those the hearer and solitary realizers who have attained nirvana, they have compassion, and they have the mind that wishes to benefit others. And some of them may even have immeasurable compassion. Like when we do the four immeasurables, they may even have that kind of compassion. However, they have a very strong yearning for their own nirvana. Okay? And that is a subtle type of self-centeredness. Our gross type of self-centeredness is, I want this and I want that. But a subtler type is preoccupation with our own spiritual path and seeing our own liberation as much more important than anybody else's. So these solitary realizers and hearers are self-centered in that way. They have a lot more compassion than we ordinary beings do. But because they're geared toward their own nirvana, yeah, there is this kind of self-centeredness. So that's why our teachers really encourage us from the very get-go to learn about bodhicitta and create causes for bodhicitta and really imprint it on our mind, yeah, so that we don't go through the here and solitary realizer path, but go directly to the bodhisattva path. Okay. The reason for this is, if we go through the here and solitary realizer path, being really focused on our own nirvana, we attain nirvana, but then we sit in blissful meditative equipoise for eons. Yeah, which sounds good if you're only taking care of yourself. But what about everybody else who is still revolving around and around in cyclic existence? Well, it's no good for everybody else if we're just blissed out in our own nirvana. So that's why our teachers encourage us to go directly to the bodhisattva path. Yeah. Because those hearers and solitary realizer arhats, after some eons of remaining in their blissful nirvana, the Buddha has to wake them up and says, hey, there's all these other sentient beings that are still in samsara. You got to come back and work for them. Yeah? Don't stay in your own solitary peace. Come back and work for others. And so when they do, then those arhats have to start at the very beginning of the bodhisattva path. Whereas if we go directly into the bodhisattva path, yeah, then we're actually in the long term going to get to full awakening quicker than taking the detour of first getting our own liberation and then becoming bodhisattvas. Because you spend so much time in your own blissful nirvana. Okay? That's why our teachers are always saying, think about bodhicitta. You know, meditate on compassion. Really consider the welfare of others. Yeah. Sure, it seems easier to think about your own liberation, but keep bringing your mind back to the welfare of others because, you know, others have been kind to us and because they're just like us in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. Okay, so they really encourage us in that way. Okay, so the yearning that the hearers and solitary realizers have for their own nirvana, that becomes a big obstacle for them generating the great compassion that is necessary in order to generate bodhicitta. Okay? Yeah, because if you're really focused on your own liberation, you may have some compassion, but it's not going to detour you from your own liberation in order to work for sentient beings. Okay? So that's about the first two lines, yeah, of the hearers and solitary realizers arise from the excellent sages, the Buddhas. The excellent sages are born from bodhisattvas. Okay? That's explaining how they're born from bodhisattvas. Okay, then Chandrakirti continues, and he says, compassion alone is seen as the seed of a conqueror's rich harvest, as water that nourishes it, and as the ripened fruit that is the source of long enjoyment. Therefore, at the start, I praise compassion. Okay, so remember I said that he doesn't start out by directly praising the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. He directly praises compassion. So this is it. Okay? So why is he praising compassion? Well, he's saying first, compassion alone, only compassion, is seen as the seed of a conqueror's rich harvest. So a conqueror refers to the Buddha because the Buddha has conquered all the afflictions, all the defilements, all the obscurations. So the rich harvest of all the wonderful qualities of a Buddha, yeah, come from the seed of compassion. So, compassion is the seed that leads to full awakening. It's also the water that nourishes that seed, and it's also the ripened fruit that is the source of long enjoyment. Okay? So the seed is at the beginning, the water that nourishes it is in the middle of the path, and the ripened fruit of full enlightenment that leads to the enjoyment of self and others is the end of the path. So he's saying here in these two lines that compassion is important at the beginning, middle, and end of our path. It's not just important, at the beginning and then we can forget about it, or in the middle and then forget about it, or you do other stuff and at the end you practice compassion. It's not like that. But it's important at the beginning, middle, and end of a bodhisattva's practice. Okay? So here he's really demonstrating that compassion is the root cause of the other two causes, of the non-dual awareness and of the bodhicitta. Okay? Remember, he said the three causes of bodhisattvas: compassion, non-dual awareness, and bodhicitta. And here he's really going to emphasize compassion is important at the beginning, middle, and end, but it's also the source, especially at the beginning, of the other two causes of bodhisattvas. Compassion is the cause of bodhicitta. Compassion is a cause of the non-dual awareness. Okay? Okay, well, that's what I'm going to explain. Okay, how is compassion the cause? Okay? So, before we enter the path of accumulation, the first bodhisattva path, compassion is like a seed. Okay? And without compassion, bodhicitta can't arise. Without bodhicitta, we don't even enter the path of a bodhisattva. Okay? So with compassion, we're able to look at the dukkha, the unsatisfactory conditions of ourself and others, and feel that, I want to protect all living beings, all sentient beings, from all unsatisfactory circumstances of samsara, and I want to lead them to full awakening. So that's a compassionate thought. Okay? Now, to do this, we have that compassionate thought first. Yeah? I aspire to lead them to full awakening. I want to do it. Okay? But to do that, then we have to actually make the very strong determination. Here's where resolve comes in. Okay? We have to make a strong determination to attain the highest awakening. In other words, a strong determination to become a fully enlightened Buddha in order to lead bodhisattvas in order to lead sentient beings to that state. So that resolve is the bodhicitta. So here you can see how compassion is a cause of bodhicitta. Okay? Yeah. Because you can't wish for everybody to become enlightened if you don't have the compassion that wishes them to be free of suffering. Okay? And you don't have the energy to get enlightened for their benefit if you don't have the compassion that wants them to be free. Okay? So that's how compassion is the seed of bodhicitta. Then, seeing that to actualize that determination to become a fully enlightened Buddha, to actually reach the goal of that bodhi resolve, then we need to practice the 6 far-reaching practices. Okay? The chief of which is wisdom. And so, due to bodhicitta, we then immerse ourselves in generating wisdom and cultivating wisdom. Okay? And that wisdom is going to start out being the wisdom that is free from the two extremes of eternalism and nihilism. Yeah. And then it's going to progress to become the real non-dual wisdom that is free of the duality of subject and object. Okay? So you see, the compassion generates the bodhicitta, and if you really aspire for bodhicitta, then you have to have wisdom. So your bodhicitta fuels your wisdom, and that's because of the compassion. Okay? So this order of cultivation, compassion leading to bodhicitta and then to non-dual wisdom, is the way that the practitioners of modest faculty practice. Okay? Because they don't gain the non-dual wisdom before they they enter the path like the sharp faculty ones do. They generate it afterwards, okay? But the sharp faculty ones do the wisdom before. But in either case, whether you're talking about modest faculty or sharp faculty, compassion is going to be the reason that spurs you to generate whatever level of wisdom that you're generating, if you're on the bodhisattva path. If you're on the hearer path, it's your renunciation of samsara that generates that gives you the impetus to gain wisdom. But on the bodhisattva path, it's your compassion. So there's a big difference, isn't there? Yeah, a big difference between renunciation of my own misery that leads me to try and discover the nature of reality versus compassion for all living beings. Big difference. Okay? Yeah, well, when it says compassion for all sentient beings, it includes ourselves. Okay? And actually, what's very interesting is renunciation is compassion for ourselves. Okay? Because when we really want ourselves to be free of all unsatisfactory conditions, that means we want ourselves to be free of all of cyclic existence, all of samsara. So real compassion for ourselves is renouncing cyclic existence. But then we don't stop at compassion for ourselves. Our compassion is for all sentient beings. So when we want all sentient beings to be free of the unsatisfactory conditions of cyclic existence, then we generate the bodhicitta. Okay? That's how it works. Okay. So then in the middle of our practice, compassion becomes like the water that nourishes the seed. Okay, so that seed is what leads us to have bodhicitta, what leads us to generate wisdom. But in the middle, we need to constantly nourish that seed. Yeah, we all know this. Yeah, you don't just plant a seed and it sprouts and then you stop watering it. You have to keep watering that seed. So we have to really keep meditating on compassion, keep our compassion very strong throughout our whole practice. Because at the very beginning, when you first enter the path of accumulation, it's possible to lose your bodhicitta and fall down to the hearer and solitary realizer path. So we really need the compassion to keep our bodhicitta very strong. Okay? Because if our bodhicitta isn't nourished by compassion, then it can degenerate. Or it can just kind of take a long time to be really active, like you generate bodhicitta, so you're on the path. Maybe you don't lose your bodhicitta, but you just kind of hang out and become a little bit complacent. Yeah? So what's going to keep your bodhicitta going and being very strong is your meditation on compassion. Yeah, when you really look at the plight of sentient beings, ourself and others, and really want that all of that dukkha, all that suffering to stop, then that really keeps your bodhicitta strong. When you have strong bodhicitta, then your practice of the path goes quite easily. And then you can generate, practice all the 6 far-reaching attitudes because you have a very strong motivation. When your compassion isn't so strong, then, the rest of your practice isn't so strong. So that's why compassion is really important in the middle of our practice. Because it especially, in the middle of our practice, we have to fulfill the 2 collections, the collection of merit and the collection of wisdom. So our compassion really keeps us on track, accumulating merit, accumulating wisdom, increasing those 2 qualities. Okay? And then at the conclusion of the path, compassion resembles the fully ripened fruit. Okay? So, the fully ripened fruit is Buddhahood. Yeah. So what does a Buddha do? A Buddha works for the benefit of all sentient beings, spontaneously, effortlessly. What enables the Buddha to work spontaneously and effortlessly for the benefit of all of us? It's the Buddha's compassion. Okay? So there you see how compassion is really important at the end of the path. It's not like you have compassion at the beginning, compassion at in the middle, and then at the end you say, well, now I'm a fully enlightened Buddha, so forget these sentient beings. That doesn't work. Your whole reason for, going through 3 countless great eons of practice to become a Buddha is for the benefit of sentient beings. So that compassion is very strong, and that keeps you really, that enables the Buddha to be completely spontaneous and effortless in benefiting sentient beings. Okay? So, it's, when we really think about this quite deeply, then, J. Rinpoche, Lama Tsongkhapa says that we should train our mind to think, if I wish to become a Mahayana, somebody practicing the Mahayana vehicle to full enlightenment, my mind must first come under the influence of great compassion. Then, in dependence on this, I must generate from the depths of my heart a fully qualified altruistic intention. Once I have done this, I must engage in the general practice of the Bodhisattvas, and in particular, the profound view. Okay? So that's how he's telling us to really, right now at the get-go, to cultivate our aspiration. Yeah. Because, unless you can imagine becoming something, unless you can aspire to become something, you're never going to become it. Yeah? That aspiration is so important. Yeah? That imagination that, oh, this is possible, I can do this. Or the firm conviction that it's possible that comes from realizing emptiness. Unless we have something like this, then enlightenment, awakening, it's kind of some fuzzy something, that all these important holy beings do, but I don't really get it. Whereas, if we really have strong compassion, strong bodhicitta, and especially, this wisdom that's free of eternalism and nihilism, then we can have a very firm conviction that enlightenment is possible. And with that conviction, then we start really getting serious about creating the causes for it. Okay? Next. Now we're getting into some of the really juicy verses. Okay. So there's a few different translations of this one. Let's see if we have the same translation. I think so. Like a paddle wheel in motion, migrators have no autonomy. First, with the thought I, they cling to a self. Then, with the thought mine, they become attached to things. I bow to this compassion that cares for migrators. Okay. The next verse says, homage to that compassion for migrators, seen as evanescent and empty of inherent existence, like the reflection of the moon in rippling water. So here, what Chandrakirti is doing is he's talking about 3 kinds of compassion. Okay? In that verse, the whole verse that starts first with the thought like a paddle wheel in motion, okay? That whole verse is talking about the compassion that observes sentient beings. And I'll explain this in a minute. And then the next verse, when it's talking about migrators refers to sentient beings because we migrate from one realm to the next as we get born and die and get born and die, okay? So that compassion for migrators that sees migrators as evanescent, as fluctuating, as impermanent, that is indicating the second kind of compassion called the compassion observing phenomena. And then the third compassion is the compassion for migrators that are seen as empty of inherent existence. So that's the compassion observing the unapprehendable. Okay, so three kinds of compassion. First one, observing sentient beings. Second one, observing phenomena. Third one, observing the unapprehendable. So the compassion of observing sentient beings focuses on sentient beings who are experiencing all the unsatisfactory conditions of cyclic existence. Compassion observing phenomena is focused on sentient beings that are seen as impermanent and as lacking a self-sufficient self. And compassion observing the unapprehendable is focused on sentient beings who are seen as, who are qualified with, being empty of inherent existence. So unapprehendable, it's this word, sometimes it's translated as unobjectified, non-objectified, or unapprehendable. It refers to emptiness. In other words, you can't apprehend any truly existent thing. Or no phenomena can be objectified. That's where this, or sometimes it's called objectless compassion. So it doesn't mean that there's no object. It means that you're not seeing inherently existent sentient beings. The object is not inherently existent sentient beings. Okay? Otherwise, you say compassion observing unapprehendable. What does that mean? Okay, so that's where I'm explaining it. Okay, so compassion observing sentient beings is conveyed in the first verse. And here, this sentient beings that are caught in the prison of cyclic existence are likened in 6 ways to a paddle wheel. Okay? So paddle wheel, sometimes they translate this as like a bucket in a well, but sometimes they translate it as a paddle wheel. You know those ships that had paddle wheels, yeah? Or I guess you could have a paddle wheel in a well. Yeah, like a watermill, something where the bucket's, it's going down and has to come up, and, some kind of paddle wheel like this. Okay, so there's 6 ways in which this analogy of sentient beings caught in cyclic existence is like the paddle wheel in water. Okay? So I'll just go through the 6 right now quickly, and then we'll talk some more about them tomorrow. Okay, but first, just as a paddle wheel is tied by a strong rope, sentient beings are tightly bound to cyclic existence by afflictions and karma. Okay, maybe we won't talk about them so quickly today. We'll start. Okay, so while we seek happiness, we are very bound by the rope of the afflictions. Okay? The afflictions and karma. So we're unable to move freely, and we lack autonomy to choose what we encounter in our life. Yeah. So we don't have real freedom in cyclic existence. We can't choose our rebirth. We're propelled by the force of our afflictions and karma. We can't choose the circumstances that come to us in our life. We feel like we have a lot of control in our life. But when we really look at it, how much control do we really have? Can we keep ourselves from aging? Can we prevent disease happening to us? Can we prevent death? All it takes is 5 minutes of trying to watch your breath and to realize that your mind is totally out of your control. Okay. So let alone control other people, which we try and do, we can't even control our own body and mind. You know? We sit here and say, I'm free, I live in a free country. But that kind of freedom is, you know, the freedom to indulge our attachment. Isn't it? Yeah. I have the freedom to use more than my fair share of the world's resources. I have the freedom to drive my car anywhere I want to at any time of day and night and not care about how I'm polluting the world, the air. Yeah? This is what we think of as freedom. Yeah. I have the freedom to vote, but do we have the freedom to select the candidates? Yeah. So, you know, we really have to think about what freedom means. It's, you know, it's not the kind of freedom we think of in a democracy. Yeah. It's a real internal freedom. Yeah. It's freedom from our own attachment so that we don't cling to things or cling to people. It's freedom from anger. Wouldn't it be nice to be free of anger so that no matter what anybody did, no matter how they treated you, no matter what they said about you, you didn't get angry? Wouldn't that be nice to be free of anger? Yeah. Sounds really nice. And you're free of anger not because you're suppressing it or repressing it or anything, but the thought of anger just doesn't even come up to start with. That's real freedom. Freedom from our greed, freedom from our neediness. Wouldn't that be nice? Freedom from our craving and our clinging. Okay, that's real freedom. But we sentient beings don't have that kind of freedom. We're completely bound by the rope of afflictions and karma. You know? Because if we look at our mind all day, our mind is usually has one affliction or another in it. Yeah? Kind of, we see something good, attachment pulls us there. We see something we don't like, anger pulls us there. We see somebody who hurt us, resentment pulls us here. Yeah. We feel insufficient, so we put on this show of being arrogant and proud, and that pulls us there. We don't feel like doing anything, laziness pulls us back here. Yeah. So when we look at our states of mind, so often they're just, you know, one affliction after the other. And we're Buddhist practitioners. We at least know about cyclic existence. We have some awareness that ignorance, anger, and attachment are afflictions. But look at most sentient beings. They might be very good-hearted. Yeah. And very nice to other people. But are they free from ignorance, anger, and attachment? No. Do they even think that it might be good to be free of ignorance, anger, and attachment? No. Yeah. Other people should be free of greed and anger. But my anger is justified. And my attachment, it really isn't greed or attachment. I deserve these things. Okay? So we kind of explain things away a lot. Yeah. You know, so it really helps tremendously, you know, when you're just walking in public places and you see different people and you think, you know, these people haven't even met the Dharma. We're not looking down on them and criticizing them, but it's with compassion. They haven't even met the Dharma, so there's no awareness in them of their minds being under the control of ignorance, anger, and attachment. And I've met the Dharma, and I'm hardly ever, have the understanding that my mind's under the control of afflictions. It's true. How often during the day do we stop and say to ourselves, my mind is under the influence of an affliction right now? Yeah? When we get mad, do we say, oh, affliction is in my mind? Or do we say, I'm right? Once in a while we might say, oh, I have anger in my mind, I should do something about it. But after I tell this person off. Okay? And when we have strong attachment, do we say to ourselves, my mind's under the influence of attachment? No, we say, I want that. I want that. I'm going to get it. Exactly. I want more and better. Yeah. So, even those of us who've heard the Dharma, it's so hard for us to even identify afflictions in our mind and to say, even if we identify them, to do something about them. Yeah. So, but then you look at the vast majority of human beings, and they don't even have the little bit of awareness that we've been taught due to the kindness of our teachers. And what about animals and all these other beings in all the other realms? Do they have any kind of awareness? My cat has no awareness of following ignorance, anger, and attachment. Yeah? Feel like sleeping all day? Sleep all day. Feel like, playing? Play. Feel like eating? Eat. Or drive everybody crazy until they feed me. Yeah. Don't like something? Yes. Yeah. And there's no awareness in our pets, who we love dearly, that, oh, gee, my mind can become the fully enlightened mind of a Buddha. Yeah. And most human beings don't even have that awareness either. Okay. So when we see this, when we can look and see how sentient beings are bound by affliction and karma, isn't that a cause to have compassion for them? To have compassion for ourselves? To see how out of control our own mind is, and to respond to ourselves with kindness and compassion, and then to see how out of control other people's minds are, and to respond to them with kindness and compassion. So often when we see other people's minds who are out of control, we criticize them. You should know better. Get rid of your anger. Don't be like that. You're selfish. But when we really look at our own mind and we see how difficult it is to work with our own mind, then we know it's difficult for other living beings to work with their minds too. So what use is it to criticize them and to judge them and to be irritated with them? Yeah. Makes much more sense to have compassion. Compassion meaning, may they be free of the suffering of being bound by their ignorance, anger, and attachment. So compassion does not mean, oh, poor you, you're bound by ignorance, anger, and attachment. I feel sorry for you. I don't expect anything of you because your mind's out of control. Poor dear. Okay. That's not what compassion means. It doesn't mean feeling sorry for the person or pitying the person or just, making up rationalizations and excuses for everything they do. It's really seeing that they're suffering due to their own afflictions and wanting them to be free of their afflictions so they can be free of the misery that their afflictions bring them in cyclic existence. Okay? So try thinking like that when you encounter somebody who's irritating you. Okay? And, while they're sitting there doing whatever irritating, think, this is a sentient being who is in cyclic existence, who is under the influence of ignorance, anger, and attachment, and has no awareness of what they're doing right now. And then you can't be mad at them anymore. You really can't be mad at them. Because I think automatically some compassion comes of, wow, it would be wonderful if they could be free of this. So even somebody's making fun of us, even somebody's teasing us or ridiculing us, we can look at them that way and say, wow, they're under the influence of affliction, and feel compassion. Instead of letting our mind go under the influence of anger and become exactly like their mind. Okay. So that's the first of the 6 ways. We'll get into more tomorrow. But I think that hopefully this will give you something to think about tonight. No, this is secret for mine. No one. Yes. Actually, it's part of an unpublished manuscript, so I can't give it out. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I feel sorry for you. But when the book is finished and is published, then you'll have this, and you'll have much, much more. Okay. So let's sit quietly for a couple of minutes, digest what we've heard, and then we'll dedicate. let's dedicate all the merit that we accumulated today, all the good energy that sprouted up in our mind due to our listening and thinking about the teachings. And let's send all that merit out into the universe with our aspirations and prayers that it ripen, so that each and every living being can be peaceful within him or herself, so that beings can live together harmoniously, so that everybody can have all the inner and outer conducive circumstances to practice the path and make use of those circumstances and attain full enlightenment. Due to this merit may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.